My stepdad shoved me to the floor at Christmas dinner and told me the seat belonged to his real daughter. That's how my holiday ended. Not with hugs or goodbye kisses or promises to see each other soon. With me on the ground, tasting blood from where I bit my tongue, and him standing over me like I was trash he'd just taken out. But here's the thing, that moment didn't come out of nowhere. And what happened next? He never saw it coming. Let me back up. I've lived with this man since I was 13. My mom married him after they dated for about a year. She called it her fresh start, her second chance at happiness. And honestly, good for her. She deserved that. But for me, it meant something completely different. It meant learning how to make myself smaller, quieter, less visible. In my own home. He never yelled at me. Never called me names. He didn't have to. His silence did all the work. A look here. A tight smile there. Little comments about real family dropped at exactly the right moment to make sure I knew where I stood. And my mom. She'd brush it off every single time. He's trying his best, Tessa. You're being too sensitive. You read too much into things. I heard those lines so many times they became like background noise. Like the hum of the refrigerator or the creak of the stairs. Just part of the house. By the time I hit my 20s, I'd gotten really good at taking up as little space as possible. I knew which topics to avoid, which jokes would land wrong, how to smile and nod and keep my mouth shut so nobody got uncomfortable. Holidays were always the worst. The house would be decorated like something out of a magazine, lights everywhere, wreaths on every door, that fake snow spray on the windows. Beautiful, perfect, cold, and his daughter Charlotte. She was always front and center. The golden child. The real daughter. Don't get me wrong, Charlotte never did anything to me. She wasn't mean. She wasn't cruel. She just existed in this spotlight he created for her, and I existed somewhere in the shadows behind the Christmas tree. But I kept coming back. Every holiday. Every birthday. Every family dinner. Not for him. Never for him. For my mom. Because some part of me still believed that if I just tried hard enough, if I stayed long enough, maybe she'd finally see me. Really see me. Instead of the version of me he'd painted in her head. This Christmas was supposed to be simple. Dinner, gifts, forced smiles. Maybe a couple hours and then I'd drive home. I even rehearsed conversations in my car on the way over. Polite answers to questions I knew he'd ask just to twist into something negative. I was prepared. Or I thought I was. The tension hit the second I walked through the door. He barely looked at me. Just a quick glance and then back to adjusting the centerpiece on the table. My mom handed me a plate without meeting my eyes, her voice too bright, too cheerful. That fake energy people use when they're trying to cover something up. And then I saw it. Charlotte was sitting at the end of the table. In my seat. The seat I'd taken every single year since middle school. I should have known right then. Should have recognized the setup. The way he was standing just a little too close to that chair, like he was guarding it. The way my mom wouldn't look at me directly. But I walked over anyway. Pulled out the chair next to her. That's when he moved. His hand landed on my shoulder, and before I could even process what was happening, he shoved me. Hard. I stumbled backward. My hip hit the edge of another chair. My hands shot out to catch myself and slammed against the hardwood floor. The impact sent a shock up through my wrists, my elbows. Pine needles scattered across my sweater from the wreath I'd knocked into. For a second, everything went quiet. Like the whole room was holding its breath. And then his voice cut through the silence. That seat belongs to my real daughter. Get out. Real daughter. Those two words burned more than the fall. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. My mom gasped, but not like a mother gasps when her child is hurt. It was different. It was the sound of someone embarrassed that things weren't staying neat and hidden like she preferred. She reached for a napkin. Like she could just wipe this moment away. Tessa, sweetie, just sit somewhere else. Her voice was barely a whisper. Her eyes darted between me and him, like I was the problem. Like I was the one who started this. Charlotte stared at her plate, fidgeting with her bracelet. She wasn't being cruel. She was just used to being the one worth defending. I pulled myself up slowly. My palms were stinging. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. He didn't even flinch. Just stood there with his hand still gripping the back of that chair, shoulders squared, looking at me like I was nothing. I said what I said, he repeated. This seat belongs to my real daughter. I straightened my sweater, forced my voice to stay level. You could have just asked me to move. He smirked. That small, satisfied curl of his lips I'd seen 1,000 times before. You never listen unless someone makes it clear. There it was. The truth he never bothered hiding. He didn't want me corrected. He wanted me humiliated. My mom jumped in with this shaky little laugh. Let's not ruin Christmas, Tessa. There's a chair by the window. The chair by the window. Far from the table. Far from the conversation. Far from being part of this family. I felt something shift inside me. Not rage. Not even hurt anymore. Just clarity. For years, I'd convinced myself that enduring moments like this was easier than confronting them. That keeping the peace meant keeping the family together. But standing there, looking at him, at my mom, at everyone sitting there in their quiet complicity, I realized something. This wasn't peace. This was surrender. I walked to the kitchen instead of taking that window seat. My hands were shaking as I reached for my coat. My mom followed me. Of course she did. Don't make a scene, she whispered. I turned to face her. The words came out before I could stop them. He pushed me in front of you, and you're worried about a scene. She blinked, stunned into silence. Behind her, I could still hear him laughing quietly with Charlotte. Like nothing had happened. Like I was nothing. That was the moment. The exact second I felt something inside me break. Not shatter, that's too dramatic. It was cleaner than that. Like a bone setting after being crooked for years. I looked my mom straight in the eyes. You will regret this. I said it soft enough that only she heard. I wasn't threatening him. I wasn't even talking to him. I was finally choosing myself. I drove home with both hands clenched on the steering wheel. The Christmas lights blurred past my windshield. I wasn't crying. I thought I would be, but there was nothing left. Just this focused, steady quiet. Like my mind had finally stopped negotiating with pain it had learned to tolerate. My phone started buzzing. Once. Twice. Then constantly. Mom. Mom again. Charlotte. Mom. I didn't answer. Let them sit in the silence they'd always insisted I accept. When I got home, the house was dark except for the light above my kitchen sink. I hung up my coat and just stood there for a minute, fingers pressed against the counter. I kept replaying it. The shove. The floor hitting my palms. My mother's whisper, don't make a scene. His voice echoing behind her, real daughter. The thing is, I'd heard those words before. Maybe not exactly like that, but in 100 different ways over the years. My daughter needs this. Charlotte's family comes first. You wouldn't understand, you're not really one of us. Each time, I'd swallowed it. Told myself it didn't matter. That I was being too sensitive, just like my mom always said. But tonight was different. Tonight, he'd said it in front of everyone. Put his hands on me. Made it impossible to pretend anymore. I made tea just to have something warm in my hands. And while the water boiled, something settled in my chest. Not anger. Something colder. More precise. Resolve. He wanted to remind me of my place. Wanted to shrink me down so small I'd disappear from their perfect family picture. Fine. I'd disappear. But not the way he expected. I opened my laptop. Not to rant on social media. Not to send angry messages. I pulled up old documents. Payments. Bills. Agreements. Every piece of paper my mom had ever asked me to help her organize over the years. Because he always liked to pretend he was the head of the household, the one who handled everything. But the truth, half the responsibilities that held that house together had my fingerprints on them. I just never pointed it out. See, my mom wasn't great with paperwork. She'd get overwhelmed, hand things to me, ask me to sort through them. And I did. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You help them. But in helping her, I'd seen things. Patterns. Bills in her name that he promised to pay but never did. Credit cards she didn't even know existed until the statements showed up. Repairs he said he'd handle that she ended up covering. I wasn't looking to destroy him. That wasn't my goal. I wanted something more specific. Accountability. I went through everything with this detached calm I'd never felt before. The heating repairs he put in my mother's name but never paid for. The credit cards he used that she covered without complaint. The house maintenance he ignored even though he insisted he handled it all. Patterns reveal themselves when you finally stop apologizing for noticing them. By the time the clock hit midnight, I had everything outlined. Not to punish him. To protect the person who kept choosing him over me without understanding what she was risking. I closed the laptop and exhaled slowly. Tomorrow morning, his world was going to tilt. Not because I was going to break anything, but because I was finally going to hold up a mirror to the things he'd spent years stepping over. And he wasn't going to see it coming. He woke up at sunrise. I know because the first call came at 6:12 a.m. I didn't answer. I was standing at my kitchen counter pouring cereal into a bowl, morning light coming through the window. My phone buzzed against the wood. His name. Then Mom's. Then his again. By the time I sat down to eat, there were 9 missed calls. By the time I finished breakfast, 17. By the time I tied my shoes to leave, 26. I didn't check a single voicemail. Instead, I drove to a small office on the north end of the city. A place I'd been once before, years ago, when I helped my mom sort out an insurance issue. The attorney remembered me instantly. He had kind eyes and this gravelly voice that somehow felt reassuring. "What brings you in today, Tessa?" I slid a folder onto his desk. "I need help making sure my mom understands what she's financially tied to. And what she isn't." He opened the folder. Started flipping through the documents I'd organized the night before. Statements she'd covered. Repairs she'd paid for. Maintenance he'd ignored while insisting everything was his responsibility. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. Just a long, steady trail of a woman carrying weight while a man pretended he was lifting it. The attorney exhaled slowly. "This is a lot. Does your mother know any of this?" "No," I said. Because he never let her see the full picture. And she never asked. He nodded, thoughtful. "What do you want to do?" "I want her to know the truth. I want her to understand what she's been protecting. At my expense." He tapped his pen twice against the folder. "We can request a meeting. Neutral ground. Lay out the information calmly. Nothing confrontational." "Confrontation already happened last night," I said quietly. "This is clarity." He nodded again. "You're not trying to destroy him." "No," I said. "Just the version of him she thinks she knows." We scheduled the meeting for that afternoon. When I walked out of the office, the cold air hit my face and I felt this strange sense of lightness. My phone vibrated again. A number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. The voicemail icon popped up. I pressed play. It was my mom, using someone else's phone. "Tessa, please call me. He's upset. He said you're trying to cause trouble. I don't know what happened last night, but we need to talk." I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of exhaustion. She still didn't understand that what happened last night wasn't a beginning. It was a culmination. By noon, the missed calls had climbed to 33. I spent the rest of the morning at a cafe across from the attorney's office. Warming my hands around coffee. Watching frost melt down the windows. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for the next wound. I was preparing for truth. At 2 o'clock, my mom arrived at the attorney's office. Alone. She looked tired. Her scarf was crooked. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying for hours. She walked toward me cautiously, like I might disappear if she moved too fast. "Tessa," she whispered. "Why are we here?" I gestured toward the conference room. "You'll understand in a moment." When the attorney spread the documents across the polished table, she stared at them with this confusion that slowly turned into fear. Her fingers trembled as she traced dates and amounts she'd completely forgotten about. "Why did he put this in my name?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The attorney answered gently. "Legally, he couldn't qualify. Your credit carried these obligations. You've been responsible for most of the household expenses." She blinked rapidly. "But he told me he handled everything." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The attorney continued. "Nothing here is illegal. But it does show a long pattern of financial dependence that's left you vulnerable without you realizing it. Mom leaned back in her chair. Her hand covered her mouth. I had no idea. That was the moment. Right there. When the narrative she'd clung to for years finally cracked. I saw it in her eyes. The loyalty she'd defended. The tone she'd used to silence me. The excuses she'd recited on autopilot. All of it collided with reality sitting right in front of her. She picked up one of the statements. Stared at it like she was seeing it for the first time. And maybe she was. Really seeing it, I mean. This is from 3 years ago, she said softly. I remember this. The furnace broke in January. He said he'd take care of it, that I didn't need to worry. But you paid for it, the attorney said gently. She nodded slowly. I did. He said he'd pay me back. I'm still waiting. Another document. Another memory. Another promise he'd never kept. And then her phone buzzed on the table. She flinched. Turned the screen up. 37 missed calls. All from him. She didn't answer. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. Finally, she looked at me. Last night. When he pushed you, Tessa. I'm so sorry. I didn't think it was that serious. I thought you two just argued. I shook my head. He shoved me to the floor, Mom. In front of everyone. And you told me not to make a scene. She winced like the words themselves were knives. I didn't know what to do, she whispered. He gets angry when I confront him. I thought keeping things calm was better. Calm for who? My voice didn't rise. But it cut through the room. Her eyes filled with tears. I never wanted you to feel unwanted. But I did, I said. 4 years. And yesterday wasn't the first time. It was just the first time it was undeniable. The attorney excused himself to give us privacy. When the door clicked shut, Mom folded her arms over herself like she was trying to keep from breaking apart. What happens now? She whispered. That's up to you, I said. But whatever you decide, it has to be with full knowledge. Not the story he tells you. She looked down at the document spread across the table. Her whole financial life laid out in black and white. Years of carrying weight she didn't even know she was carrying. I feel so stupid, she said. You're not stupid. You trusted someone. That's not the same thing. But I should have seen it. Should have questioned. He made sure you wouldn't, I interrupted. That's what people like him do. They make you doubt yourself so much that you stop asking questions. Another buzz. Her phone lit up. 41 missed calls. She silenced it without answering. And that small action, that one moment of choosing not to respond to him, felt bigger than anything else that had happened that day. When we walked out of the office together, the winter sun was already sinking. Long shadows stretched across the sidewalk. I expected her to leave, to go back to him like she always did, held in place by habit and fear. But she didn't. She stood beside me, breathing into her scarf, staring at her shoes like she was gathering pieces of herself she hadn't touched in years. Then she said quietly, Tessa, I want to go home. Not to him. To my sisters. Just for tonight. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was the beginning of accountability. As we turned toward the parking lot, my phone buzzed once more. 47 missed calls. I didn't smile. Didn't gloat. I just felt relief. He finally knew I wasn't playing by his script anymore. And tomorrow, he'd have to live in a world where I no longer collapsed under his voice, his expectations, his version of family. A world where the truth had a seat at the table, even if he tried to push it away. My mom stayed with her sister for several days. I didn't check on her constantly. Didn't hover or try to direct her choices. For once, she wasn't leaning on him or expecting me to smooth things over. She was just sitting with the truth, and that was more than I'd seen her do in years. Meanwhile, the calls from him slowed, then stopped. No apologies. No explanations. Just silence thick enough to confirm everything we'd uncovered. He wasn't looking for understanding. He was looking for control. And without an audience, he had nothing to say. Mom asked me to meet her for coffee later that week. When she walked in, she looked different. Smaller somehow, but steadier. Like someone who'd finally stepped out of a long, cold shadow. I read everything again, she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. I can't believe how blind I was. You weren't blind, I told her. You were tired. And he counted on that. She nodded slowly. I want things to be different. I want to learn how to stand up for myself. And for you. It wasn't a perfect apology. It wasn't a perfect moment. But it was honest. And that mattered more than anything she could have said at the Christmas table. As she talked about next steps, practical ones, gentle ones, I felt this strange lightness bloom in my chest. Not victory. Not even closure. Just quiet relief. The kind that comes from finally seeing your mother choose herself. And if she could do that, then maybe she could choose me too. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was tentative at first, like she wasn't sure I'd let her. I should have protected you, she said. All those years. All those little comments. I heard them, Tessa. I just didn't want to believe they meant what they meant. I know. That's not good enough. I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I let happen. And that right there, that acknowledgement, was more than I'd ever expected to hear. I didn't walk away from that Christmas to punish anyone. I walked away because I finally understood that protecting myself wasn't disloyal. It was necessary. Families don't heal through silence or endurance. They heal when someone is brave enough to break the pattern. For us, it started with one truth laid on a table where I was never allowed to sit. And sometimes, that's all it takes. One moment of clarity. One decision to stop shrinking. One choice to finally take up the space you deserve. Because the truth is, nobody can push you out of your own life unless you let them. And I was done letting him. Thanks for listening, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice when family tries to silence it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear.